The notification popped up on my phone while I was in the middle of a client meeting in downtown Chicago. Mom tagged you in a video. Nothing unusual there. She'd been on a social media kick lately, sharing everything from her tennis matches to her weekend brunches at the peninsula. I swiped it away, refocusing on my presentation about quarterly projections. It wasn't until later, sitting in my corner office with its view of Lake Michigan, that I remembered to check it. The sun was setting, painting the water in shades of amber and gold. I loosened my tie, kicked off my heels, and settled into my ergonomic chair. A small luxury I'd allowed myself after making partner at 32. The video started playing. My mother's perfectly highlighted hair gleamed under the chandeliers I'd helped them install last year. She was sitting in their remodeled living room, another project I'd funded, beside my father, both of them speaking to someone off camera. She thinks because she makes good money now, she can control us, my mother was saying, her voice dripping with disdain. Such an ungrateful freeloader. I felt the blood drain from my face. My father nodded along, adding, all those years we supported her through school, and now she acts like we owe her something? These kids today, they have no respect. The irony was suffocating. My fingers gripped my phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. Those years they supported me through school? I worked 2 jobs to put myself through college, taken out loans I'd only finished paying off last year. And the moment I landed my first real job at the firm, they'd started asking for help with their bills. Small things at first. The property taxes on their lake house, the country club membership they couldn't quite afford, their credit card debt that had somehow spiraled out of control. Being their only child, I couldn't say no. Wouldn't say no. She's so controlling with money, my mother continued in the video, always asking where it goes. I paused the video, my hands shaking as I opened my financial tracking app. There it was, laid out in neat columns, every transfer, every bill payment, every loan that was never repaid. Over the past 5 years, I'd given them nearly $500,000. The memory of last Christmas hit me like a punch to the gut. Mom showing off her new tennis bracelet to her friends, bragging about their upcoming Mediterranean cruise. Emma's doing so well in her career, she'd said, patting my hand. We're so blessed she remembers where she came from. Where I came from. The modest split level in Aurora where I'd shared a room with my cousin because we couldn't afford the heating bill for the spare bedroom. The summer jobs I'd worked since I was 14. The scholarship essays I'd written by candlelight when our electricity was cut off. I played the video again. They were laughing now, sharing stories about how they'd dodged my questions about their spending. She actually asked about the Aspen trip. Dad chuckled. As if we need to justify every little expense to her. The Aspen trip, they'd said, was a business necessity. The one I'd covered because Dad claimed his company was restructuring and he needed to maintain appearances. I'd transferred the money the same day he'd asked, then worked through my vacation to make up for the billable hours I'd lost. My office phone buzzed. Miss Walker, your 4 o'clock is here. Reschedule it, I heard myself say. My voice sounded strange, distant. Something's come up. I spent the next hour methodically going through my records. Every check, every wire transfer, every emergency that had required my immediate financial attention, Mom's cosmetic surgery that she'd sworn was for a medical condition, Dad's new car because you can't show up to client meetings in anything less than a BMW. The spreadsheet I created told a story, not of parents in need, but of systematic manipulation. They'd timed their requests perfectly, always calling when they knew I'd just received my bonus or closed a big case, always with an urgency that made it impossible to refuse. My phone lit up with a text from Mom. Sweetie, that video wasn't meant for you to see. Call me? Instead of calling, I drove to their house in Lake Forest. The gates swung open, gates I'd paid to have installed when Mom complained about feeling unsafe. My Audi crunched up the gravel driveway past the manicured gardens that cost more in monthly maintenance than my first apartment's rent. They were on the back patio, drinks in hand, enjoying the early evening air. Mom's face lit up when she saw me, then fell as she registered my expression. Emma, darling, let me explain. I saw the video, I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. All of it. Oh, that. Dad waved his hand dismissively. We were just blowing off steam. You know how your mother gets when she's had a few glasses of wine. I've brought some documents, I said, placing my leather portfolio on their glass-topped patio table. I think we need to talk about finances. Mom's perfectly penciled eyebrows drew together. Really, Emma, this is hardly the time. We have dinner reservations at Le Colonial. Cancel them. I opened the portfolio and laid out the spreadsheets. 5 years of transfers. Every bill I've paid. Every emergency I've covered. Would you like to explain any of this? They exchanged glances, the same looks they'd given each other when I was a kid and had caught them in a lie. Dad cleared his throat. Now, Princess, you know we've always supported you. Supported me? The laugh that escaped me sounded foreign to my own ears. Let's talk about support, Dad. Let's talk about the summer I lived on ramen noodles so you could keep your golf membership. Mom set down her wine glass with a sharp clink. We gave you everything. We sacrificed. What exactly did you sacrifice? I pushed the papers toward her. Because according to my records, I've been paying for your lifestyle since I passed the bar. The vacations, the renovations, the club memberships. Those were investments in our future, Dad interjected. Maintaining our social connections? Your social connections, I corrected him. The ones you use to impress people with money that isn't yours. Did you tell your golf buddies that your daughter pays for your games? The color drained from his face. Mom's hand trembled as she reached for her wine glass again. The setting sun cast long shadows across their expensive patio furniture. All items I'd helped them select and purchase. I'm done, I said quietly. As of today, I'm cutting you off. No more transfers, no more bills, no more emergency funds. You can't do that. Mom's voice rose sharply. We have commitments, obligations. Your obligations are not my responsibility. I pulled out another document. I've calculated what you owe me, with modest interest. I don't expect to see most of it, but I've had my lawyer draw up a repayment agreement. A lawyer? Dad stood up so quickly, his chair scraped against the stone patio. You involved a lawyer in family business? This stopped being family business when you called me an ungrateful freeloader on camera. Now it's just business. The silence that followed was deafening. Mom's perfectly manicured nails drummed against her wine glass. Dad's jaw worked as if he was chewing on words he couldn't quite spit out. What about the country club dues? Mom finally asked. They're due next week. I stared at her, incredulous. Even now, she didn't get it. I guess you'll have to figure that out yourself. But the Memorial Day Gala is coming up, she pressed. Everyone will be there. What will people think if we're not? Maybe they'll think you're living within your means for once. I gathered my papers. You have my lawyer's contact information. You'll be in touch about the repayment schedule. You're just like your Aunt Sarah. Mom spat, her composure finally cracking. Always keeping score. Always counting pennies. The mention of my aunt hit hard. Sarah, who'd taken me in during college when things got really bad at home, who'd helped me apply for scholarships and taught me how to budget, who Mom had always criticized for being obsessed with money because she refused to fund their extravagant lifestyle. Aunt Sarah was right about you both, I said quietly. I just refused to see it until now. Dad stepped forward, using his height to try to intimidate me, like he had when I was young. If you do this, Emma, there's no going back. Family is forever. Family doesn't exploit family. I cut him off. Family doesn't mock their child behind their back while living off their money. The next few minutes were chaos. Mom crying about how I was destroying the family. Dad threatening to tell everyone at their club what an ungrateful daughter I was. It was like watching a performance I'd seen 1,000 times before, but suddenly the stage makeup had worn off, and I could see the ugly reality underneath. I've already called the credit card companies, I said, speaking over their protests. I've removed myself as a guarantor on all your accounts. The utilities will remain in your names only, the house payment. You wouldn't dare let us lose the house, Mom interrupted, her voice sharp with panic. The house is in your names. What happens to it is your decision, but I won't be making any more payments on it. As I turned to leave, Dad called after me. What about your mother's medical bills? Her tennis elbow needs treatment. I paused at the patio steps. The tennis elbow she developed from playing at the club I pay for? I'm sure her doctor takes payment plans. Walking to my car, I could hear Mom starting to sob. The same theatrical wails she'd used whenever she wanted something. The sound used to make me rush back, checkbook in hand. Now it just made me walk faster. My phone started buzzing with texts before I even reached my car. Messages from my parents' friends asking if I knew my mother was having a breakdown. Flying monkeys, Aunt Sarah would have called them, dispatched to make me feel guilty. The next few weeks were a blur of legal documents and blocked phone numbers. My parents tried everything. Guilt trips through mutual friends, angry emails, even showing up at my office. Security had to escort them out when they refused to leave. I threw myself into work, taking on extra cases to keep my mind occupied. But late at night, in my quiet apartment, doubts would creep in. Was I being too harsh? Should I have given them one more chance? Then I'd remember the video, their laughing faces as they mocked my concerns about their spending, the casual way they dismissed years of my financial support as their due. The memories would steal my resolve all over again. 3 months after cutting them off, I heard through mutual friends that they'd had to downsize. The Lake Forest house was on the market. Mom's tennis club membership had lapsed. Dad's BMW had been replaced with a more modest vehicle. They're telling everyone you abandoned them. My cousin Rachel told me over coffee. Aunt Linda's crying to anyone who listened about how her daughter left them destitute. I stirred my latte, watching the foam swirl. Are they actually destitute? Rachel snorted. Hardly. They're just living like normal people now. You know, the way they used to before they started using you as their personal ATM. The hardest part wasn't the guilt or the angry messages. It was seeing their social media posts, carefully curated photos of them making do with their new lifestyle, always with pointed captions about learning who your true family is. I threw myself into therapy, trying to understand how I'd let things get so far. My therapist helped me see the patterns, how they'd trained me from childhood to feel responsible for their happiness, how they'd weaponized my success against me. Your financial success threatened their control over you, she explained during one session, so they had to reframe it as something they were entitled to. It protected their egos while keeping you obligated to them. 6 months after the cutoff, I ran into them at a restaurant in the city. They were sitting at the bar, heads bent together over a shared appetizer. They looked normal, like the parents I remembered from before the money started flowing. Mom saw me first. Her face did that thing it always did when she was calculating her best approach. A flash of recognition, followed by a slight narrowing of the eyes. But before she could say anything, I'd already turned and asked the hostess to seat me somewhere else. Later, as I was leaving, I heard Dad call my name. I kept walking. The guilt was still there, but it was different now. Not the crushing weight it used to be, but more like an old injury that only ached when it rained. A year passed. I got promoted again. Bought a condo, adopted a dog. Life moved forward in ways both big and small. Through the grapevine, I learned they'd finally sold the Lake Forest house and moved to a townhouse in the suburbs. Mom had taken a part-time job at a boutique. Dad had actually started working again, rather than just pretending to run his consulting business. Aunt Sarah visited me one weekend, and we went through old family photos. You know, she said, showing me a picture from when I was about 10. They were better parents when they had less, happier too. Money changed them. No, I corrected her, looking at my younger self smile. Money just revealed who they really were. The real turning point came during the holidays. Instead of my usual anxiety about their gift expectations, I donated the money I would have spent on them to a scholarship fund for first-generation college students. It felt like breaking free from a cycle that had controlled my life for too long. My cousin Rachel invited me to her family's Christmas celebration. They asked about you, she said, as we helped clean up after dinner. Mom said they seemed different lately, more grounded. I loaded dishes into the dishwasher, thinking about the video that had started it all. They had to be. Reality didn't give them much choice. Are you ever going to talk to them again? She asked. I closed the dishwasher carefully. Maybe. But not until they understand what they did. Really understand. In spring, I received a letter. Not an email or a text, but an actual handwritten letter from my mother. The handwriting was shaky, unlike her usual confident script. Dear Emma, it began. I've been attending therapy twice a week. Your father too. We've been learning about something called financial abuse and how parents can perpetrate it against their children. I'm writing this letter because our therapist suggested we each make amends, but only if we truly understand what we did wrong. I think I'm starting to understand. I sat on my balcony reading the letter 3 times, my coffee growing cold beside me. My dog Luna pressed against my leg, sensing my emotion. The letter continued with specific acknowledgments. Mom wrote about remembering the winter I'd worked overtime during law school to help them avoid foreclosure, while they'd spent money on a cruise. About realizing how they'd manipulated my success into their entitlement. About the shame she felt watching old videos of themselves. We didn't just take your money, she wrote. We took advantage of your love for us. We turned your success into our weapon against you. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know that I see it now. I see what we did. There was no request for reconciliation, no subtle hints about financial difficulties, just accountability and what seemed like genuine reflection. Dad's letter arrived a week later. It was shorter, more stilted, but equally revealing. I was jealous, he admitted. My daughter was more successful than I'd ever been, And instead of being proud, I tried to make your success about me, about us. We didn't earn any of it, but we acted entitled to all of it. I'm sorry, Emma. Not because we lost the money, but because we lost you. I took both letters to my therapist. We spent several sessions unpacking them, examining my feelings, discussing boundaries. She helped me see that forgiveness and reconciliation didn't have to be the same thing. After careful consideration, I wrote back. Not to promise reconciliation, but to acknowledge their efforts at understanding. I set clear conditions. Any future relationship would be built on honesty, respect, and firm financial boundaries. No more manipulation, no more entitlement, no more guilt trips. We're in therapy too, I wrote. All of us learning how money and family got so tangled up. Maybe someday we can talk about it in person, with our therapist present. But for now, I need you to know that I'm proud of myself. Not just for my success, but for finally standing up for myself. I didn't tell them about the promotion I'd just received or my new condo. Those parts of my life weren't theirs to share anymore. We met 6 months later in a therapist's office. Neutral territory with professional support. Mom had gotten rid of her designer clothes and expensive highlights. Dad's Rolex was gone. They looked older, but somehow more real. The conversation was awkward, painful, but necessary. We talked about the past without accusations, about the future without promises. They shared their progress in therapy, their struggles with living within their means, their gradual understanding of how they'd hurt me. "We miss you," Mom said at the end. "Not the money," she added quickly. "Just you." "I miss the parents you used to be," I replied honestly. "Maybe we can find our way back to something real." Today, our relationship is a work in progress. We meet occasionally for coffee or lunch, always Dutch treat. They've learned to celebrate my successes without trying to claim them. I've learned to love them while maintaining firm boundaries. Sometimes I still watch that video, not to hurt myself, but to remind myself how far we've all come. The parents who laughed about taking advantage of their daughter are gone, replaced by two people slowly learning to live authentically. As for me, I'm finally free of the guilt that drove me to fund their lifestyle for so long. My success is my own now, and so are my choices. It turns out that sometimes cutting people off isn't about punishment. It's about giving everyone a chance to grow.